After 4 days of rallies that took over San Francisco's Market Street, Ocean Beach, Dolores Park, and City Hall, while overnight closed sessions were happening between both parties for nearly a week, a deal has been reached.
A historic victory.
The San Francisco Unified School District and United Educators of San Francisco made the announcement after a 13-hour overnight session that ended the 4 days of strikes and 11 months of previous negotiations.
Fully funded health care. We got wage improvements. We got sanctuary cities, protections from AI.
The $183 million deal means an 8.5% pay increase over 2 years for classified employees. Those are not teaching staff. Certified employees like teachers will get a 2% raise this year and next, along with additional paid workdays, which would equal to a 5% increase. San Francisco's Mayor Daniel Lurie said he worked closely with both sides, bringing in city staff and experts to help find middle ground. Where's the money coming from? The school district is facing a $100 million budget deficit. They're saying they're having to tap into their emergency reserves, pulling out $111 million. Something they can only do for this 2-year contract. And Maria Sue said layoffs and cuts are still on the table.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, and Socialist and Community College Maths professor Michael Hoffman. We're online at whatsfpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as @Don Eduardo Barca. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode where we found this episode. We have merch as well. If you fancy a shirt and wish to wear it just like my partner is at the street market over the weekends, you may contact Andy and you can always get one yourself at whatsfpodcast.com. Thank you very much. And we have our special guest, our beloved AJ.
Hi.
And I almost turned it over to Andy, but I would like to say thank you, AJ, for coming back. Welcome back. AJ, teacher and socialist and member of the United Educators of San Francisco, my former union as well. And person we've had lots of ongoing political discussions with throughout What's Left and who has helped shape us as well. Thank you for joining us, AJ.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's good to see you.
Now I'll turn it over to you, Andy.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here as well, AJ. And we're going to be talking about the UESF strike. But if people don't know, a lot of us go way back with AJ. Me and Michael were in the ISO, and AJ and I have been in the ISO for quite some time before we both left around the same time. You maybe have heard about, and Eduardo has mentioned a reform caucus that I was part of, Educators for a Democratic Union. AJ and I were part of starting that, along with a set of other union activists. We spent years, decades, trying to get our union to the point of a strike. So it was actually very nice to have AJ, when you reached out to me a few days before the strike, to say, hey, we're about to go on strike. This is really going to happen, because I wasn't sure, but you were saying, no, this is going to happen. But telling me that it was not the same, not having me there, or it was a little odd to not be able to have. And I really appreciated that, and I really appreciate getting to talk to you that day, the days before. Made me feel like a little bit of a part of it, and so in starting this off, in light of the fact that really the tendency when the union would threaten the strike every time, build up the strike vote 1, strike vote 2. Get that 95% approval rating on the strike, use that to threaten, the district with. But every time, 15 minutes before the deadline, they would just oh, we reached an agreement. And it was because you fought for us and da-da-da-da. So they would always cut the strike off. So this time they didn't do that. This time you really knew they weren't going to do that. So I guess I'd like to just give you an open-ended avenue here to say, what do you think was going on? Like, or just talk about how it went down different this time than all those times when they just played pretend.
Yep. Okay. I have to clear my throat a lot. My voice is still recovering, so I hope it sounds okay. It's been a lot of chanting. Um, yeah. I'll say I really appreciate being able to be here to talk to y'all about it today because it's been a little bit of a wild experience. All of a sudden for me, all of a sudden things were moving really fast. And partly I think that's because uh, I've really struggled since 2021 to care at all about what was going on at the top of my union and what they were saying and what they were organizing. And, I've even had questions about, I have much deeper questions about many things union related. So, I don't go to union meetings anymore. I'm not in contact with like that layer of leadership in the same way that I was before. And all of a sudden, one of the more active members at our site, we had a member at our site who's on the bargaining team, the big bargaining team of 100 plus people, was saying that we were going to do these things called practice pickets in November. And at that point, I was like, whatever, we're still just marching around in circles. Like, I'm not going to go march around in a circle around the neighborhood I don't need to practice how to walk around in a circle type thing. And that was November. And then next thing I know, strike school was being called. Like, it seemed like it was really happening. And I still wasn't sure at that point at all, because I think it's not just that I've been out of the whatever loop of leadership. It's also just like you said, I've been through this. It's my 26th year in the district. Every single contract has pretty much looked the same, that scenario that you laid out. So been through it so many times. But strike school had never been called. I went from, not being involved to volunteering to go be a strike captain, and went to the strike school. When I got there, I realized that something was different. That something.
When was strike school?
It was, oh God, I have to look at a calendar, but it was the weekend, the week prior to the strike. So we had strike school, and then we were back at school for a week. And then after that, the strike happened. And also, there had already been from this same person at my site, some talk of like, yeah, I think, there's a strike school coming up. If we go on strike, I think they're going to want us to kind of like be at our schools for a little bit in the morning and then go, so there's already some talk of a plan. And when the strike school itself, I left there going, oh, okay, this is really happening. Like, they have every intention for this strike to take place. And part of it, there was a speech by president of CTA at the beginning, who used to be in UTLA, and a lot of rah about what had happened in Richmond with the West Contra Costa County teachers, and a lot of talk about midterm elections, a lot of talk about elections. And so just when I left there, I was like, okay, this is part of this. It just seemed clear that like this was part of this strategy. So I have big questions about striking in this period, and like what power, what they actually look like, and whether or not strikes are actually connected to stopping work anymore at all. Like, all of these questions sort of been raised for me after this week, but it just seemed clear that it was like, yep, they're ready to do 2 to 5 days. We had a little folder that had like 5 days of agendas for the picket lines already printed out in it. They were handing out picket signs. Like, this is actually happening. They have every intention of doing this strike. They're going to want to keep it short. We have this long holiday weekend coming up. It just seemed clear to me that it was set up perfectly to kind of go do something for a couple days, maybe push it to the end of the week, have a long holiday weekend to settle for whatever. And, that's pretty much how it played out in my opinion. But, so yeah, when I left there, it seemed clear to me that it was real and that they had every intention of doing it no matter what happened in the next couple of days. When I got back to school the following week, that was kind of my message to people. It was like, this is really happening. So I opened my room that week every day at lunch. Everybody came to my room during lunch break for that whole week prior to the strike. And yeah, that's when and everybody showed up. So everybody was, over the course of that week, I think every person on staff was in there at least one day, and the majority of people were there every day. And that's where we started really beginning to organize. But I don't know if you want me to go into how that prep stuff looked yet.
Let me ask a few basic questions, and then see if Michael has some questions about the run-up, and where Eduardo, and then we'll get into the thing. Number one, what were the primary issues people were talking about that were spoken of being important?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the five, there were kind of five main things that were
no phone games. Oh,
so healthcare, same as in Richmond, right? Fully covered dependent healthcare. The cost of healthcare is insane for people with kids, right? So healthcare, number one. Number two, there was this demand around salary, which was that it was 14% for classified and 9% for certificated. So this was cool because this is something, we talked about in EDU, like that the paraprofessionals and all of those people in that job class should actually get a higher percentage bump than certificated. Like we argued about that with people I know. I think actually our slogan was equal pay, but this idea that it would be good to get the classified staff a higher raise.
And just to say, just in case, paraprofessional classified are people who are acting as support in the classroom. Often support with students with individualized education plans, especially IEPs and things like that. So they have been historically kind of really the bottom. I talk about it a lot in the show. That bottom tier that gets treated the worst in the workplace often, like custodians, cafeteria workers, and paraprofessionals kind of get the worst treatment in a school.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're specialized. There's a category for specialized. I was looking at the sped ed part.
Yeah. If you have special suffix. Yeah. Salary for classified, salary for certificated, and then there was the demand around sanctuary schools. And the demand around, San Francisco has been running overnight shelter, temporary housing for families out of Buena Vista Horace Mann. And there was a demand that continue, and that the district looked into, opening another site that would do that for families.
Which, by the way, I have family members that took advantage of that. They slept at home, been homeless, and former students. Very useful.
So those were the five kind of key points. There were other things that were not talked about, that were part of the settlement and part of the demands. Those were the main ones. There was also, I will definitely talk about this more later, but there was a very important proposal about nurses, counselors, and social workers, the staffing levels, trying to get some guaranteed staffing levels for them in school sites, because their jobs are infinitely on the chopping block every single year. And what's happened to the nurses over the last couple of years is, like our nurse used to be full-time at our site, and now she's spread over 3 sites. And, social workers, same thing. So schools are in a cycle of like trying to find grant funding and using other discretionary funding to try to pay for these positions, because there's no staffing levels that are guaranteed in our contract where we're going to have these things at every school site. So that was another one. And then who knew, because nobody talked about it until it was passed. There was like a section about the use of AI in schools. The demands were extremely loose and weak, but there was a section about the way that AI is going to be implemented or not in our schools.
Yeah, and just to say that the nurses, counselors, and that was sort of built in, not just from the district, but built into the way that the union has fought its previous demands, where it said cuts away from the classroom. And that has often led to not just administration being cut, but these people who are not in the classroom. So that we in our own, the unions in the way we have fought these cuts in the past have opened the door towards this group being finding itself in a more difficult spot.
Mhm, mhm.
How was bargaining approached differently, if at all? Did they have a larger bargaining team? Were they talking about like open bargaining? Was it like, have you seen a shift in terms of the bargaining methods?
There's been a shift, historically over my career. It was similar to previous bargaining under this union leadership, where they have their what they call their big, beautiful bargaining team, and it's 100 plus people. They try to get somebody from every site to be on the bargaining team, and they're actually sitting in the room during this whole week during the strike. Um, it's great. Sounds really nice. I mean, what's nice about it, I would say, is that it gives more points of contact. Like, we actually do have somebody who's in those bargaining rooms. But my conversations with her, it's not a democratic body. They're not actually deciding bargaining strategy, and there's not a lot of like openness. At a certain point, she was welcomed in. She got to write proposal. She got to work on a proposal. It was like a key part of this agreement. But then at a certain point, once there was any sort of disagreement, blah, 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 she describes it as cultish. Very not sure how democratic the big bargaining team is.
And just to check, the big bargaining team didn't start till the strike itself started. Is that right? Or
No, they've been there all along.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they've last time too, last contract.
I was looking at I mean, I know 4 people on the at the bargaining table, and I'm thinking, why there are like 100 people there
Mhm.
versus 4? Like, how do you get a conversation with that amount of people at a bargaining table?
My understanding is that there's not a lot of it. There are certain places. I mean, they were not tasked with ever coming back and talking to us about what was going on. That did happen some throughout the course of early bargaining. And then, you realize there was this really long period where the district was not meeting with us or talking to us at all. So we had like some early bargaining that happened, and then they basically went, just absent for a very long time. And then we've been through this process of cooling off and fact finding and all of that stuff. But in some ways, I think a lot of times they are there to be like a show of force, backup of here, we've got 100 people in the room. They're not necessarily actually used as like a conduit to being in touch with the membership, for example. Crazy idea that they would like go back to sites and have discussions and votes on things. It's not really used in that way, as far as I can tell.
What the folks that I know, 3 of the people that I know, 4, they weren't spectating; they were actively involved.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
no, I mean, our bargaining, like I think they're in. That's clearly who's in charge, right? That's clearly who's like making the decisions and telling people what is going to happen, and telling people what's next, and telling people, what they should be saying to the people at their sites. The person from my site, she says, I go there, I do what I can. Like nobody listens to me. Like they're not interested in hearing like what I think. Like, there's no space for disagreement. There's not room for dissent. It's really clear that everything's already been decided already. Like those are the things that she has told me about her experience on the bargaining team. And she was there this whole week, in sleep deprivation, up all night bullshit, and, being told not to tell us anything.
Right.
During the fucking strike.
From top leadership.
Being told not to tell you anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was like the allowable information that she was allowed to share with us was literally like exactly what was in the press releases. But there's
And
plenty of that I
yeah,
would love to say, not edited out, because that was kind of like my experience of the process of the strike. I have a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the question that I wanted, the two main questions I have are basically one, how did the concept of legality
Mhm.
influence bargaining strategy, and then also um, how did that impact what people were actually learning in the process? So, like, you talked about your friend, um, or the person who was on the bargaining team at your site. Like, what do you feel like they were learning through that process? I mean, obviously you're not them, but you know, you it seems like it seems like they took away this idea that everything had to be tightly sort of controlled. They didn't seem to take away the fact that their input was super valuable. But was anyone kind of like radicalized by seeing the bargaining process? Like, do just like, because I guess to clarify, in my union, opening up the bargaining team was very important for having people realize what the bargaining process actually was like. Because at our union, everyone was just mad at the union, and it was like, um, obviously some good reasons for that, but also not understanding that the union couldn't just do whatever they wanted the union to do, like literally, like not understanding that there were employers making decisions. So when we started having more people going to the bargaining process, people were like, "Oh my God, the district are fucking assholes," you know. And it's only led to. I mean, we don't need to talk about my union, but that's the kind of thing I'm wondering is what was the process some of these people went through by being part of the bargaining team? How would you like what did you observe from that? And what's the process they went through from being from being active in the strike? Like did people's relationship to the union change?
Okay, well, I'll say two things about that, like one specific and one a little bit, I think, broader. I don't, because we had no vision into the process or the strategy or anything, all I can say from my side, from my experience of it, is that it was clear that um, no input from the membership was needed, either before, in the week before, or during the strike. Like, was not sought out, was not of interest to anyone, like what our experience actually was. Um, once the strike began and I was a strike captain and I was on nightly strike calls, not a single question was asked of us except for, what fun activities did you do on the line today? What did you say when you had to call people up to find out where they were to get them to show up? That was it, right? In fact, the chat was disabled as usual. And when people did raise their Zoom hands to ask a question, they were told, "We know teachers don't like meetings. We're going to let you go. Just text your area reps after the call." So there was intentionally no space for discussion about anything that was happening, and questions about it were about, yeah, like legally, right? Like, we don't want the press to get a hold of what's happening. The same thing they always say. We don't want the press to get a hold of what's happening. Don't want to get people's hopes up about what's happening in bargaining, because it's bargaining, so you have to. So these were the things that, for the most part, I think people heard and largely accepted. On a very, very, very tiny scale, after the second day, I went home and just wanted to write down, like, what are my thoughts about what's happening right now, and shared a little thing about, that I had written up, with people at my site and some other people that I'm still in contact with, about what bargaining could look like and what it is currently looking like and what we really need it to look like in the midst of a strike. And, that got some people thinking. That's all I can say. It's like, it's this big. It got a few people at my site thinking. It got a few people at my site to say, "I'll sign on to that." Right? I'll sign on to that letter. 24 hours later, it was moot because we were settled already. But so I was able to, like, tiny conversations with a few people at my site and a few people at other sites. But more broadly, I do want to say, like, I kind of feel like it's similar to saying, like, the question's like, oh, well, maybe bargaining shouldn't happen like this. It's like, well, maybe elections shouldn't happen like this, but they could look better if they happen like this. Like, I have real deep questions about bargaining, period.
Yep.
And like whether we should be signing contracts, period.
Yep.
Like, why should we even be in that room with them at all? I'm not convinced that there's any reason to be. And I'm not convinced that there's any reason to ever sign a contract like the old IWW, way of thinking about relating to your boss. It's like, are we going to do anything at this site? Are we actually stopping work? Are we actually setting the terms under which we're going to work? Or are we just like marching around having a parade?
Oof, I have lots of questions there.
Eduardo, do you want to go with that question, or you want to go?
I mean,
I'll just say that. Can I just say that, like,
yeah.
I completely agree with that. I think legality and bargaining are traps, and they all restrict what is possible for us, and that's all that's used for. So, I would go beyond. Like, I feel like unions, like workers, have to jettison all of that to really claim new territory in class struggle. Because right now we're caught in a trap. But I do want to get into how your union was able to go beyond the one trap of like the threat of a strike to actually going on strike. But I want to stick with Eduardo's question too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So one thing I'm just having discussions with my former network. I'm just wondering, it seemed scripted, because what was brought up was there's an uptick in labor relations across the state, and as well as it seemed like a scripted narrative that needed to a wave of California of having to go with the agenda of the California Teachers Association with "We can't wait." I saw that all over the strike, and so I'm wondering, how much is it extracting from your opponent, setting the terms, demanding the district, or actually just, how do I say this? I don't want to say theater, but because I do value a strike. I do think a strike is worthy, but how much is it election year and influence of outside the major unions versus grassroots worker-led union strike?
Okay. I have to get into some like details about like things that were happening during the strike, I think, to talk about. But I think, the question, do we value a strike? The question is like, what do we learn? Like, what did anybody actually learn from doing this? And the experience of it, I'm telling you, it was bizarre in a lot of ways, because there was the fact that the administrators' sympathy struck is, I'm still trying to get my head around all the ways that was that a good thing? Was that a bad? What it actually meant is that we didn't actually have real picket lines anywhere except for at 8 sites in the district. So what everyone was doing, except for at the 8 hub sites, which I can say more about in a minute, was having parades, having coffee and cookies in front of their schools for an hour and a half every morning, because the schools were closed, right? Schools were closed to students. So schools were closed to students except for, all schools were closed to students. Workers, their school sites were closed except for at 8 sites, the hub sites. So at 8 schools, if you wanted to go to work, we were actually all told to go to work every day, right? I got a phone call every night telling me to report to John O'Connell, to a school I don't work at, right? That's where I was supposed to go every day. So everybody got told at night on the robocall their site to go to, and anybody who wanted to work could go show up at these 8 hub sites. So these were the only places that had picket lines where people were actually scabbing and crossing the picket line. And none of the other schools could be open because the administrators were all out. SEIU had called a sympathy strike, but they had members crossing the picket line. I was at John O'Connell in the mornings before I went to my school site, and they had non-union district managers standing there helping SEIU people and who wanted to go in to work, they were all sitting watching videos and eating lunch inside all day because there's no work to do in an empty building. So it was like and we did not talk about we were asked to send reinforcements to those sites in the morning from 7 o'clock for an hour if we could. We were told on the strike captain's call, could we get a few extra bodies out there in the morning? And I wish that more of my coworkers had showed up for that, because it definitely, for the 2 other people who did from my site, it was a very significant experience for them to be walking on a picket line and actually watching people go into work and trying to engage with them and things like that. But for the vast majority of the teachers on the strike, it was nothing like that. Their school was not happening. Students and families, right, were told that they could go on independent study and get these packets and sign up for online blah, blah, blah. They wanted to do that during the strike. And from what I heard, like 2,000 families did that. When I asked on a strike call if we had access to those numbers and if we were concerned about people digitally crossing picket lines or anything like that, I was told that was not our job. Our job was to get people out to the line in the morning. So that's all I know about that. But yeah, that's why I'm like, yes, it definitely felt scripted. How does the PSL have a newspaper that says victory to hand out at Dolores Park at 12 o'clock when they were in bargaining till 5 a.m. They already have the newspaper printed and ready to distribute at the park on this, it just, yeah, in that way it did, which is why.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
And PSL is Party for Socialism and Liberation.
They are the leadership of our union. I mean, they're the leadership of our union. They published,
and 2 of the people on the bargaining table are part of the PSL, that at least that I know of.
Yeah. More, yeah. So they, I think there was this moment where the CTA's sort of, larger electoral strategy, statewide electoral strategy, and this kind of history we have now, led by nurses and other unions, like, we're going out on strike for 2 days. And then, this kind of pattern that we have of the way that so-called strikes have happened, like over the last 20 years, kind of dovetailed with our union leadership's moment to be like working class leaders. And it was for them, it was a win-win opportunity because all of us were really pissed off and haven't fought for anything and haven't had, felt like this was actually a moment and a chance to finally express how difficult it is to raise a family in this city, how impossible the conditions in our schools become year after year. And so it was a win-win opportunity for those folks at the top. I mean, yeah, that's what I'd say.
And the we can't wait slogan across California.
Yeah, I mean, the slogan was like, that's been around for a few years, right? Like, it's been like these little strike actions across the state, like built under this same banner, which I definitely think is about aligning people in, 2 years for the election.
Yeah.
So do you feel like this thing was adopted whole cloth from the CTA? Like, what was the role of the CTA in basically the planning of the strike and running of the strike? Was it like, were they basically, is there somebody who just whispering basically in the ears of the leadership of the bargaining team, telling them what to do?
Yeah, I would
seem like that.
I wouldn't know. I mean, I know that in the past, they have always, the CTA and the CFT have always felt like a break on anything that we were moving towards, and the anger and frustration of the actual membership and any talk about strike. And, that was utterly absent. There was, we had our strike school at the CTA office. And like I said, it was kicked off by a speech from the president. So, of course, the whole strike was, every action that we were at was like covered with CFT paid organizers out on the picket lines and at all the events and stuff like that. So I would guess it was very much like this.
It was very much like that because I heard one of those folks on KPFA just yesterday that said that they were coordinating with the union.
I think it goes beyond coordinating. They control it. Like, if we go back to our EDU experience from the jump, our new EDU president was controlled by CTA. The strategy, and they use fear. I mean, I hate to break this, but it's almost like Lita Blanc was on Epstein Island, in a sense that they are able to use that fear, like, of something, to get them to do exactly what they want. And so I have no doubt, given the way you've described it, AJ, that this is a CTA run operation, and with very little opposition from any layers of any kind of leadership. Like, it's not a collaboration. This is control, and the control goes well beyond Frank Lara and Natalie Reese and things like that. That's what it looks like to me, because what you're describing is that the strike, from the very top, you had class struggle being talked about, and being directed, and agendas, and here's your plan for the week. That's not going to get produced at the level of the UESF president.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, the amount of resources, just the sheer amount of resources that they clearly brought to bear on the whole organizing of the thing, the branding of it, the messaging of it, yes, the agendas, and the way it was going to be carried out.
Because I think we can go down a very negative place here, but I do think, if you go over the week of that strike, because we talked about, like, the possibility of, like, doing something together, and I'm a little bit concerned that they were having you go. I thought you'd be going to your own site with your folks and be talking in the morning there, and then talking at the end of the day there. Like, that's how it went down in LA, at least. You actually met with people at your own site during the course of the strike, and it sounds like that didn't go down that
No,
way.
we did.
Okay.
We just reinforced before our picket lines went up. Some of us went out to other.
Okay, gotcha.
And
All right. Then, in terms of those goals of doing things together, and having an experience that was anything where independent, where something could maybe even break loose. Did you have any experiences like that, where the sense of independent working class action, even of the smallest amount, or independent working class thought, if you will, did you have any experience like that during the course of that week?
There were a lot of very positive things. So I will say that, just at the level of the school site, and at running into people that I haven't seen in a long time, and people just having that feeling of, finally we're doing this. That was nice. And there definitely, there were people at my school site who, said things like, I can tell this is changing me. I don't know exactly how, but this is definitely shifting things. Or, people just, as it was ending, just sending on our group signal, like sending messages out to each other, just like, I wouldn't have wanted to do this with anyone else. Like, this has been such a powerful week. It's been transformative. Like, all of that was beautiful and real, and really happened, just in the ways that I think we could see that we could, organize for each other, support each other. At one point, I guess about 1 or 2 days into it, one of our staff members, you could tell he was slipping. Like I said, it wouldn't have mattered if he didn't come. It's not like it was a real picket line, but maybe he would have just wanted to stay home the next day, and not come out. And his mood had changed, his sort of attitude to the whole thing had changed, and people kind of just like went around him, like the way that people kind of noticed that. Somebody point that out to me, like, do you know this is going on with him? Like, I have a good relationship with him. I'm going to talk to him. Like, is it about childcare? Is it about money? Like, how can we help each other? That kind of stuff. That was beautiful, right? That's the real way that we could, from having some kind of contentious arguments in the week before the strike, between staff members with kids and those of us who don't have kids, and start times, and like these kind of arguments that we had in the run up to it, and then just watching everybody turn out for each other and just make the thing happen every day. And even though it didn't actually go long enough to where we got into some of our plans about like how we can mutually support each other financially, and with childcare, if things went on, those conversations started at least to have like this idea of we don't have to all handle it on our own, like we can lean on each other. That was all very nice. A sort of transformation with this one person who I always kind of saw at the site as being somebody who, asked good questions and complained a lot, for lack of a better word, but didn't ever want to really do anything. And then this person just like 1,000% showed up, like wanted to do everything, volunteered for everything, set up, take down, go here, go there, just threw themselves into it. Those are the very tiny little but very beautiful things that I did see and did happen. I do have, as to my goal, like, will we be able to just do something together? Will be some of us who could do something together at the site coming out of this, because the principals were on sympathy strike. I think it makes it still very difficult at my site because it is not clear whose side those folks are on and who they answer to ultimately. It's still not clear at my site. And I don't think it will be any clearer after this. It will still be that was our really awesome principal who went out on strike with us. And that's not nothing, but given how scripted this was and the kind of conversations that I think happened between the leaders at the top of these organizations, and that my principal is actually the president of the administrators union, I have real questions about what may have been assured to her, or what kinds of conversations may have happened in advance of this that made it easy for administrators who make the salaries they do to say, okay, we can give up 2, 3, 4 days of our salary so these teachers can walk the picket lines and get health care for us because of our Me Too clause.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was the question I was trying to ask. The one you just answered now, which is like what did people actually learn through the practice of it? And when I was asking that, my thinking right now is about the people near me. How many of them are aware, first of all, that there's some actual conflict between our interests and the bosses? And that's why even if it's the union does some like half-assed thing, like invite people to the bargaining table, I'm thinking about how can I use that to help develop the long-term argument with them that we are actually workers, because they don't actually see, my colleagues. So where my colleagues are at is different. But so I guess that, like, thinking about the people around you, you were just pointing out the small steps forward in consciousness that can occur, even if there's, even if it's a top-down scripted thing. There are things that you can learn about struggle, like just the act of and the practice of doing something else aside from going into your job and doing your job, like actually doing something else, actually disobeying on a certain level is important. But it seems like if your local administrators were basically on board with it, having that same kind of strike action when the local admins were not on board does seem like it's a whole other world. It's a whole other level of things. So I see how like there's like these small steps forward in consciousness that occur because this opening has been, because there's some, at least the form, at least the practice, at least the kabuki of class struggle is there, but obviously doesn't necessarily last long. So I guess in terms of like the people immediately around you, do you feel like there's been a step forward in terms of that argument that actually we actually are workers who have to disobey and have to actually halt things in order to get our way? Like, do you feel like that general argument is now somehow easier to make, or?
no.
Okay.
Because there's nothing that we did that was disobedient, and we didn't halt anything. The
Right.
administrators did. So
Right. Okay.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah, I would say the biggest, if I were gonna find what's the biggest win out of this in terms of it
Hmm.
myself, just that it would be a little bit of a pushback against sort of that dominant ideology that we're all kind of out here, you better figure it out yourself, and more about mutual aid, and can we turn to each other, even people that we
Right.
may usually talk shit about at work all the time or don't like very much or think is a real pain in the ass in staff meetings. Like, can those people actually be the people that you need to get through what was a difficult week? It was not, I mean, not an easy week, especially for all of the people at my site, which is the majority who have kids who are in school. Um, Not an easy week, but yeah.
You know, there's so many areas that we could just go into. As far as what was achieved, I'm a part of several like groups online and up and also via group messaging, and it ranges from mission district families to affluent families that are organizing or in the major organizations. And you know, I see those affluent families actually discuss the the actual agreements and then go into the areas of funding and state power. And then I see families on other groups talking about childcare, help, what do they do, feeling ill-informed, not knowing what, like the basics. It's like it runs from, if we were to use, I don't know, the Maslow's law of hierarchies of needs, there's a huge contrast of what they felt around this. And I think it comes down to two things. For me, one thing I got out of this was I just saw that there was the fact-finding report, and I shared this on with Andy. Everything that was demanded was sort of within the scope of the fact-finding report. I don't see anything that was radical or demanding outside of what is that already within the parameters of what was feasible. And I would think a strike would demand the impossible. And that's what I think was sold to the members, that we were going to get victory on all these fronts and more, you know. But I think there was, it ran within the range of what they could achieve. And doesn't seem very radical to me. That's one thing. Second, and I'll let you answer to it. Second, I didn't see anything that was connecting families in the way that, except support us. I even heard Frank Lara on the radio. Just support us. Just what does that mean? What does that look like? And how do you do that when you're trying to survive? And if we looked at past strikes, which I have with Andy, I told him, I said, look, there were unemployed councils, there were bartering systems, there were mutual aid councils, there were solidarity networks, and just, you know, there were these infrastructures in place to be able to hold a strike and to be able to have sympathy from workers that are not part of this class that teachers sometimes separate themselves from. This is the two things that came out of observing and analyzing all these different groups.
Mhm. Do you, maybe I'll say something about the second part first.
Yeah.
Then you can, if we want to go into the agreement, I'm happy to, but um, yeah, I think, you know, it didn't have time and it didn't need to develop any of that stuff. You know, had there been a mechanism, enough, you know, any kind of organization at the bottom that could have like pushed for this to not be over, that is definitely what people on different picket lines were saying. Like the mood on our picket line at our site, and I'm not saying this was everywhere, I don't know, but there was definitely enough of a layer within the membership who was like, really, we're done already, like that. We were just gonna have this holiday weekend and we could come back refreshed, and then we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like, we at least don't want to push this another second week to see what happens. I mean, in that case, then I think some of those other things, like how do we support our families with the fact that that we all need childcare, like the ones on the line and the families in our community, or, you know, strike schools or mutual aid, like all of that stuff. It didn't need to develop because, I mean, I think we have to look back to 2021. Like, this city knows it can make families just suck it up and deal with their kids at home for a lot longer than a week and just figure it out. Right. So you don't have to do that much, I think, to, you know, you're not going to, I don't think there's a lot of risk of losing, you know, massive supportive families by having no plan and no conversation in your membership about how to support the communities around the school and just saying, like, we're going to be out for a week, surprise, deal with it. Because we, COVID lockdowns, deal with it. You know, I feel like that's something that we can't know because don't have a time machine. But had we not all had the experience of 2020, 21, I don't know if it looks exactly the same to just shut down the schools like that, for the superintendent to just say, okay, well, I guess we don't need to have like an active plan to keep all the sites open. Maybe we can just close all the sites for a week. Maybe that's the easiest way to deal with this. That's part
And
of
for folks that would say, well, this was not enough time. I mean, the 1919 Seattle General Strike, where tens of thousands of workers walked off in solidarity with the shipyard workers, 5 days, just 5 days. And it involved community coordination, solidarity committees, cooperative self-help efforts. I mean, it was all supportive. And we're talking about tens of thousands of workers in 5 days. So
yeah, I'm not a fan of like the one day longer, one day stronger idea of striking. Like, I'm definitely not saying
I guess what I'm trying to
that,
say
but
is, where was the bridge
yeah,
for that infrastructure when you have that figuring it out process left at the hands of kids and families that
yeah.
don't know what to do in the midst of chaos, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't chaos. This was all organized. There was no chaos here. That's the first thing I would say. And before we get to the agreement, because I think it's really important. I'm just going to say that agreement doesn't matter. Like, the things that matter are the things you're talking about, AJ, where a colleague who everyone thought might have been a pain in the ass is somebody they thought they realized they could rely on. So before we get to the agreement, I'd like to see if you can speak to any of those things that actually matter.
Mm-hmm.
How did you see the workers around you changed in whatever minuscule version? Because that's the only reason a strike matters, is for how it changes a worker.
Yeah.
And what, AJ, I think you're getting at is that the people who organized the strike knew that that's the change they wanted to minimize. They wanted to minimize change of the worker, while putting on the. I don't know if you were just sparring with the district or if you were shadowboxing, but you weren't fighting the district, you know, in this strike, and you weren't fighting your boss in this strike. But are there other ways you want to speak to? Because I feel like that's just going to be ignored even by the people who listen to this episode, because we're so used to talking about agreements and negotiations. And I don't give a fuck. The whole reason for this is to transform the working class. The whole possibility of revolution is how workers can be transformed through that experience. And you have already said, look, dude, very minimal. But I'd like you to speak to anything else you can say about what you might have seen or been surprised by or saw as transformative, even in this entirely scripted act.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to the agreements.
I just want to say that I fully agree with that, and that's my thinking as well. Is there some sense that people learned something valuable?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll talk about the best part, which was actually the day that they called the strike off. And what I mean is that the way it went down is that it was, we had a feeling, a little inkling that it was coming to an end, because when I had the strike captain call on Thursday, it was like a joke. It was like 10 minutes long. So this is like 6 p.m. on Thursday. It was like We were on there for like 10 minutes. It was nothing but sharing the fun activities that you did on the picket line that day. They didn't do breakout rooms by region, which they had done all the previous days, so that we could just talk to our area person for a minute. They didn't do that. They took no questions. I was like, They didn't talk about getting people out to hub sites the next day, which we'd talked about all the previous days. So you could feel like, oh yeah, they're buckling in to settle this tonight. And then when I got up first thing the next morning, 6 a.m., I opened my phone. Oh, strike captains. Strike's over. No picket lines this morning. Today's a transition day. Go to work or don't go to work. This is from our union. Go and decide or don't. Like, it's over. We're done. Stay tuned for ratification process. So even in the settling of it, they didn't even want us to talk to each other, right? Total bullshit. So, but then I get on the chat with my staff and I'm like, let's meet. We'll meet today. Let's meet to talk about this. And so we all went to work and we sat in my room from 8:30 till 1. And I was surprised, like, people were pissed. Pissed. There were, 2 people in the building who didn't come to this meeting. I'm guessing they were not pissed. They were off doing other things. But yeah, people were pissed off. People felt that they were used. People felt that we, were just starting to get somewhere. And why would we call it off when we're finally starting to see them move? Why are we calling this off? Like, this is what we did a week for? Like, this settlement? Like, not to get into the details of that. But that's just, I was surprised. I thought I was going to go in there and be the only one who was like, this is, and I wasn't. And, some people just stayed for about an hour and talked about it and were a little bit like, whoa, what was that? Like, that was weird. And some people stayed for hours. A good, core group of people stayed and talked about it for hours. And that, I think, was the most important day of the whole thing for us. And the people had a lot of questions about the process, like how it was over like this, and how do we get to decide on it? People are very upset about the agreement itself for a variety of reasons, or just really disappointed and shocked that that's what we would settle for. And we had good conversations about the union leadership itself, about whether or not, this was kind of the plan from the beginning or not. Like, it just raised a lot of questions for people. Most of which were aimed at our union leadership, which is where they should be aimed. And I would say, what does that mean? One channel of it is that what it meant is people being like, next union elections, we should try to da 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 da. And for me, that's like, no, that's not the answer. Like Andy mentioned earlier, I've seen people with the best of intentions go up into the role of leading that union and see exactly where that goes, and it's not good. But for other people, it's like we had this one conversation on Friday about, somebody just being like, well, what would the alternative be? What are you saying? I'm like, well, we could not go back to work next week. We could still keep our school out on strike, and he was like, oh, really? Like, what would that be like? Like, what would that look like? I'm like, well, the admins will be back and our school will be open. So like, well, could we do that? Like, well, how many people do you think, what if it's just you and me? Like, that kind of conversation, those are good. That's the best thing I think that's come out of it. Like I said, I'll just stop there because my pessimism and cynicism will take over. But I'll just let that stand. It is what it is, and it was a beautiful day Friday.
I'll say I'm surprised as well. I'm surprised that there was that many people who had that response. Wouldn't have necessarily anticipated that. That's good.
But here's the thing, it's only because we came together. And people just had a chance to do it, figure it out together, because everyone else I was texting at other school sites, nothing. They were all alone at their school sites. They were the only one in the building, and everyone they were talking to was overjoyed about healthcare. And it would just, you needed to actually put people in the same space to like make sense of what just happened together. And I mean, we even had the first person who spoke in our circles, like one of the older women at our building who's been there like the longest. And at first she was like, I'm happy. Shoo, I'm glad that's over. And then like the circle goes around and it comes back around to her. And she's like, this is kind of bullshit. You know?
That's exactly why you shouldn't let workers sit there together. Nothing good will come of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
The question is, what do you do with that? You know, I feel like you could have some kind of follow-up meeting or something, but then what? You know, so I don't know. Did you have any thoughts about that? Like
Well,
what to
but
do
we
with that
started,
agreement that was developed?
yeah, I mean, they very much wanted to like let other people know why they don't like the agreement. You know, that was kind of what came out of it, is they're like, you know, other sites aren't having this chance. And if you don't, you know, you wake up to a message that already says we won, posted on Instagram, like they're not, you know, even asking us if we think we won. They wanted to reach out. So there was, during that time, there was just a ton of like texting and emailing like everybody else they knew at other sites, just to kind of say like, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And there was some talk about pulling together a statement about why we're voting no on it. And I'm in a kind of place with that. I'll, you know, because I feel like I can write it. I can just write up the whole thing for everybody, and people can say, yeah, because I couldn't get anybody to, you know, we're like, well, I'll look at it. But the confidence level is so low, right? It's like, I can write that up for people and people can sign on to it and we can send it out to people just as a way of like, take another look at this. You don't have to vote no. Like, why did it go down this way? Just to get some of those ideas out there. But you know, nobody, even those people that we went through that conversation together, there's still not one other person at my site who's like, yes, I will talk to you about how to write this thing and we can put these ideas together. And then that gets me feeling back into some very old slippery territory of I'm just the person who's, you know, I'm just, it's like when I felt, how I felt like was when I was the building rep, the shop steward for my union, and I had to stop doing that because it just seemed like I didn't actually have people who were willing to do anything underneath me, but they were fine for me to say my radical ideas. So I'm open to all of your thoughts on that question, because it's kind of what I'm wrestling with this weekend. Is that what?
Well, I want to show this that your colleague did. I thought that was awesome. But we lost, scratched out all the things. I mean, it is worth going through. Like the victory cry was full healthcare, full dependent healthcare. That's not a minor thing. That's a big thing in people's life. A 14% salary. Well, I don't know what the percentage, but salary increases for both teachers and paraprofessionals. Sanctuary school agreements, some language around AI, and then they did say there was something for nurses and counselors. So that's what I heard, you know, and that's the we won part of it. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, like in terms of the formal tentative agreement.
So the nurses and counselors proposal section was completely scrapped. Nothing was changed around that at all. Zero. 2 pages of absolutely legal nonsense that is going to result in no change whatsoever to special ed teachers' actual lives and working conditions was added to our contract. I can go into detail about it if you want, but it's nothing. It's nothing, in my opinion. Eduardo, you said you read it, so I'd be interested what you thought about it. But special ed gains zero. The raises for certificated are terrible. It's 4% over 2 years. Not even inflation. The union put out in their blast to us that they got us a 5% So they just were dishonest about it. The 5% comes from adding work days to our calendar. So we get 4% over 2 years. We get an additional 1% because that's how much it is if you work 2 extra days over the course of the contract. Classified, we had the district had agreed to 10% 2 days into the strike, and then we backed that all the way down to 8.5% for classified over 2 years. And sanctuary schools, yes, but again, it's a legal document. It doesn't matter if you're not organized at the site to stop someone from coming in your building. They're just going to come in your building. And the maintaining the shelter, again, it's like cost neutral for the district, looks good politically, doesn't cost them a thing, doesn't mean anything if the city pulls the funding for it, they're gone. And healthcare. So healthcare is the one you can point to and say, okay, this is like going to be a real meaningful, especially if you if you have kids, that's going to be a raise. You're going to get more money in your check, and the healthcare is going to be covered. However, it's going to be covered for 1 full year for the life of this contract. The first half of the contract is only 50% covered. So it starts 50% in July of this year, 50% coverage. And then for the last year of the contract, it's 100% coverage, at which point the funding for that is gone. So it will dovetail with an election, which in my mind means that what will happen is we can't go on strike next time because we actually need the goodwill of San Francisco voters to help pass another parcel tax to continue to fund this healthcare. Now, they say in the agreement, which no one has seen. I mean, I got a copy of it sent to me, but there's this whole side letter, this memorandum of understanding, which I've not seen. If anyone knows where I can find this memorandum of understanding, I would be so interested in reading it, because that supposedly says how things are actually the stream for the funding. But my understanding is that it's being funded from this bucket of parcel tax money that ends in 2028. And our new contract does say that the district has to continue to provide us with that health care. But in actual practice, it will be very easy for them to come up and say, we have to pass another parcel tax. If we don't, we're going to have to either get rid of your health care or just close 20 schools. They were already set up. They've already set this up to be a lose situation again in another year and a half. And the nurses, counselors, and social workers section was completely X'd out by the district, dropped from the conversation, not mentioned again by our union. The whole page was redlined and thrown away, I believe on the 10th, maybe the 9th, maybe the 10th, and never mentioned again. So I in no way think it is acceptable to completely sell out one segment of our union in order to get a deal passed at all.
Yep. With and such a bounded deal. Like, I didn't realize how bounded, even that one thing that is where you put most of your victory to, is very bounded and seems like it's very limited. And that's what that part I didn't know.
And so what Eduardo said before about the fact-finding report, I mean, they didn't even get the certificated raise back up to the 6% that the fact-finding report said it should be. So, it's all contained within that. And some of the things that we're calling a victory don't even meet the level of that report, which is not neutral and not on our side in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the MOU should appear soon. It's not right now available.
Yeah, but I figured.
Yeah, it's not.
Vote for details that have not yet been worked out or publicized.
There's a special education part, which I think I was, again, because we're doing this public, I'm still trying to figure out. So if there might be misunderstanding, please forgive me. But what I'm understanding is there might be some remedies for caseloads, such as $1,000 overload pay per extra student under certain conditions, 60 minutes weekly elementary compliance time, and $2 million annual funding for improvements in complexity indicators supports via a joint committee. Class sizes retain existing goals. with sabbatical paused,
Yep.
but reinstated later. I'm comparing it to the fact-finding report. There were so classified raises 6% over 2 years. Yes, you did say so. Then this tentative agreement, which 8.5 over 2 years. What did you not mention? I think you mentioned
6% was for certificated in the fact-finding report, and the 8.5 was what we got for classified.
yes. Yes. And yeah, I think you mentioned the core.
First off, I want to talk about, because the AI piece features pretty small, but it's interesting that they put language in it about restricting it. It's absurd to do that because our national, like AFT has already said, we're training 100,000 teachers on how to bring AI into the school. Like, and when I think about the question of taking up AI, to me feels very connected to this whole discussion of where does control of your school actually lie?
Mm.
Teachers have to stop using IXL. Teachers have to stop using programs. They have to refuse to use programs that actually data collect on students and learn about students and learn about how students learn and are training a program to become a teacher for our students. Teachers have to refuse to use those things. Like, it's not that complicated, actually. Teachers have to demand that we rip out the ed tech out of the schools. So this is completely doable. It's completely doable, but it's connected to the fact, it's connected to everything you've been talking about, AJ, about where the actual locus of control for what's taking place lies. It's coming from the top. But I do see out of even the thing you're talking about, that circle your teachers made at the end on the last day. I do see in that's where teachers could possibly say, what are we going to do to actually get control of our lives and get control of the way things are going? So to me, that the idea that you could get AI language that you'd in any way feel safe about, absolutely not. Absolutely, the best you can say about it is it's hoodwinking you into believing something's being made safe while the armies are marching into your school, data collecting on your students and replacing you as they build an infrastructure, so that when you finally do strike in a meaningful way, which won't be in 2028, that won't be the meaningful strike, then we'll have our little AI replacement to just take you out. That said, so for me, that AI actually is like is for me a key to understanding what this is versus what it could be, because it's completely within our power to begin to make headway on defeating AI at the workplace. And teachers have to stop using AI tools to grade. They just have to stop. And unless they do, then okay, you're training your replacement. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you other than you are training your replacement. So my sense is, and this comes back to a question Michael asked about the 2028 general strike, and it feels like this is all leading to an electoral-based general strike atmosphere. So that we've gone now through the theater of the single strike, so that we can go through the theater of the general strike. And I wonder if you have something to say about that, because it feels like things are being aligned, but aligned from the top. And that's how I can't prove that, but that's how this feels.
Mm-hmm. I hadn't thought about that. I had forgotten. I'd cast aside the 2028 general strike call. But that, that's something I definitely want to think about more. It's an interesting way to think about it and to frame it. I mean, it dovetails with this question that this brought up for me about, like, what does this word strike even mean? How meaningful is it? Because part of knowing how orchestrated, controlled, and planned out the amount of time this thing was going to take was my knowledge of how possible and feasible it would be for the district to pretty quickly move to getting massive numbers of students onto teacherless schooling, that I had real questions about these hub sites being open and how they were being used and what was going on there and why they had to be open at all. But it seemed pretty clear to me that it would be fairly easy to just turn these hub sites into places where you could drop your students off. They would be supervised and you could get them into school for the day. So I totally agree with you that it seems like a very simple, I mean, it is a very simple demand, just stop using IXL. And yet it's a simple demand that is very difficult to convince anybody of at the site level. Very, very, very difficult. And I don't think because it wasn't discussed at all during the course of this strike, because I don't think anybody's really serious about that. So it's like some language that they put in there to do another nice sounding thing, like the sanctuary schools one. Sounds good. Doesn't really do anything. That I don't see much crossover in the conversation between what we just fought for with all the focus on healthcare and being able to open any space in conversation about AI.
I had families asking me, what does that mean, that language of sensory schools?
Yeah.
If people are not at the level of demanding that their coworkers are not thrown into the bus, then making a demand like about the fundamental tools that everyone's using for their work. I feel like I would see people stick up for their coworkers before they would demand.
I agree. Yep. You're right.
So I feel like there's a relationship between that kind of militancy and confidence developing. But one could come with the other if there's more conversations like AJ helped create with her co-workers that you could see that kind of thing developing. But it seems like such a pie in the sky thing to be like, yeah, we're gonna like not use this tool that is kind of that we already use all the time and that makes things seem convenient. Then you're talking about making my job harder.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, though. I actually do think, I'm not going to say there's a chicken or egg. I actually do think that breakdown where you're cutting loose nurses or counselors is fundamentally, if we're not there, then that's the discussion I'm having about IXL, and we have to move to that place before I really do believe there's an order to these things, and I believe, Michael, there's a right order, not that there's a script, but if workers aren't able to say no, we're not leaving one of us behind, they're not going to be able to say, here's how we're going to construct society.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's clear you have had impact, AJ. I want to acknowledge that actually your development as a radical has clearly actually had an impact on the people around you at your site. And that's something I've been trying to more closely track in my own work. Just like, look, I don't have some coherent revolutionary project I'm building, but I'm at least gonna try and stay in an argument and see how that impacts events, even if it's, initially, at least in minor ways. But like, I don't know. I want you to speak to that a little bit. Like, do you see that? Like, do you see how your kind of intervention created a different, more critical, deeper learning?
It's actually a pretty complicated and personal question in a lot of ways, because I have, like I said, since 2021, I've basically been like, fuck this union and my sort of political work for whatever it has just been, 100% completely about at my site. Like, is there one person I can talk to about not giving these star tests? Is there, something I can say in this staff meeting and see if anybody bites and nobody ever does? It's like that has been my political life for the last, whatever this is now, 5 years. After absolutely nobody at the site stood up for me and my coworker who, you know, didn't get vaccinated and didn't want to have to shove swabs up our nose every single week while nobody else did. It changed my relationship to my staff in not a very good way. So personally, this has been difficult because I'm want to be able to organize with them and to heal that part of me that was very hurt by that. And nobody has ever taken personal or group accountability for their behavior at that time, except for one person at my site who I deeply respect for apologizing, to me for the way that we were treated. But there has been no kind of collective reckoning. It's a lot of the same people. I mean, we've had some new staff members since then, but it's a lot of the same people. So that's been a piece of the journey of these last 3 weeks for me. Another is just sort of all the hangovers from the way that I was trained to organize when I was in the ISO, and kind of feeling just a questioning of kind of every move that I make, everything that I put forward. Am I doing this out of sort of habit of a way that I was trained, which is like, am I making space for this to actually be something that we're doing collectively, or am I like ramming some sort of line through? You know what I mean? Like, that question is kind of always there at the back of my mind. Knowing that I have experience, many years of doing this job and being on this planet, and knowing that I have something to offer because of that, but also really there being a part of me that doesn't want that wants to push that away. But I know that I think that because I came back from that strike school and opened my room for lunch every day and said, everybody come, and people came, I know because that happened before. And I know because I called everybody together on that day, on that last day, I know that those were significant. I know that because people had that experience, they probably had a different experience of the strike than other people did. I know that that's true. I know that people appreciated what they called leadership and organization that I kind of gave to what happened at our site. People have told me that. So I know that's true, but it's complicated for me.
I can only say, AJ, that it's interesting to listen to you right now, because it gives me that really everything that was the best of what you brought to the ISO, I can see now in what you're doing right now and what you're taught. Like, it's so fucking real and so honest, and I can relate to it. I just have to say I really appreciate the fact that you joined us today, or you're in my life, my political life and my personal life. And I don't know if people who are listening to this can appreciate how, in my opinion, the importance of the truth you're talking about, the truth of wanting to make a revolutionary change and seeing how far we have to go, and not giving up on it, and at the same time almost feeling, am I giving up? Like, just so many questions that you're throwing out there that are part of, I know that me and Michael go through, and I believe, Eduardo, you maybe go through a version of that. But that ultimately, these kinds of questions you're talking about, AJ, are the kinds of questions I do believe everyone is going to have to grapple with in their own place in trying to make something significant happen. And we all know change has to happen, and people keep looking for it from somewhere else, but we're going to have to stop doing that. And when we stop doing that, this is what the discussion is going to sound like right now. Like, very modest, very minimal, very conflicted. But I really do believe if I get more people around me sounding like you, but in their own voice, I'm gonna have more hope about what's happening.
Mhm. I appreciate that.
I agree. Thanks a lot, AJ.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
want to
go ahead.
also just say that the basic act of creating places where people actually can speak frankly about things, I feel like I've hit on it as like the key radical contribution of people who are truly like, no, actually, the working class could figure it out and run society. When do we ever actually get to just fucking talk about our work and what to do about it? There's so, like, you see how much this union structure is an obstruction. It actually prevents people from doing things a way that might organically, so all that stuff. So just the fact of like opening up to people and letting them talk to each other seems like a thing that is threatening to this, the completely top down Democratic Party union nonprofit model that has completely come to dominate what people understand as social change. And so it's like actually hearing your story about the people sharing and then the person coming around and being like, wow, this is fucked up. Like to me, like that, like it makes me want to cry. I'm like, yeah, if you just let people fucking talk honestly, like really have time and space to talk and discuss things honestly through shared experience, like they come to much more radical conclusions than what we're supposed to allow.
Yeah.
So just by you doing that, I feel like you're a treasure. I'm like, I wish I had some AJs at my work site.
Yeah.
We might have, you know, we might have even more contentious union meetings. I don't know. I'm talking about like a minor, but still, it's refreshing.
I wish I had all of you at my work site.
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that person you're talking about, what they're grappling with is actually not that different than what we are grappling with. They start with what they kind of are supposed to say, what I should, like that should thing is running back there, either in the frontal lobe or in the back lobe. And by the time they come around, something has been freed. Like, well, what do I actually think?
Mm-hmm.
And then that gets released. And that is a struggle for the ISO trained us with should. Here's what you should do. And that's like death. It takes, now we have to untrain ourselves to just like, well, what do I feel like I want to do? What am I called to do? And then following that. And that I believe is closer to what revolutionaries need to do than we have our own act of liberation to do by virtue of the training that I think a lot of us got. Eduardo, do you have any comments?
I have lots of comments. And it's just a small world. I've been in the districts for a long time. I think it's like AJ said, you run across people and then you're like, oh, hi again. Even you mentioning Lita Blanc, Andy, her son went to school with me, and we went to the same school.
Yeah.
And we're still in the same fucking circles. He's just like, how do you not? That's what I was gonna say. Can you leave her name out? I don't want to get shit later. But no, it's fine. You said Epstein Island, Andy. Come on. I'm just gonna be like, oh my God.
Look, you're either close. This is how I look at it now. You are either closer to Epstein Island or you're closer to the working class.
Yeah, I just imagine Jake Blanc, her son, coming after me. You said this or whatever, and like you might, not like he listens, but I'm just in case it just. I'm always covering my bases. Anyhow, let's. That was I am. appreciate, and AJ, everything that you've brought up. Definitely share the same thought about the critique of union leadership acting as managers of dissent.
Mm.
I don't. I would not. I kind of did imagine it. As soon as I didn't imagine that, I did imagine that would happen. I know folks there. They're very keen on this is the agenda, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what we have to do, and it's
Pushing the correct line.
yes, and
They got it worked out.
that's not how I envision or how I thought workers' strikes functioned, were organized. So, but thank you, AJ. You have provided insights. I appreciate your what you're doing, where you're at. I've grappled with the same thing, with feeling a bit just giving up on the past, giving up because of the past, excuse me, of past organizing. And I still hold maybe some of the scars still left from 2020, 2021. And no one has apologized. They don't have to apologize to me. They can apologize to all the different families that I worked with directly who were struggling during that time. And I would be very satisfied with that. They can attack me all they want, but they didn't ever do that. There was no recognition, no acknowledgement. And that's why I think it was hard for me to see this strike as anything moving and touched by. Even so, you found yourself, amongst it and working with people at your site. I wanted to know what you were doing during this time, and I think you've given me some room for thought. What would I have done if if I still be in the union? Uh, maybe that's the best thing to do. Maybe not worrying, be concerned about. Yes, there is much to say about the union leadership, but also your local site. What does that mean for you as far as organizing? So anyhow, I've found this conversation very enlightening. Thank you, AJ.
Thank you. I'm really, really glad to get to just share and talk it all out and try to pull some threads together, and hearing from you now that all three of you are outside of it, outside of the union, outside of the city. It was actually very helpful, really, really helpful to hear you today. Thank you. Helped me a lot.
Yeah.
I don't want to let them drop, because I just want to point out there's some other threads which we're gonna see how the elections come into your union activity. And one of the things I thought, Eduardo, you were gonna want to get into more, which is a big question, which is how are the unions going to play a role in rehabilitating the Democratic Party? And because we see that there are structures there for them to do that they're struggling to rebuild their identity. The liberalism as kind of did collapse for a while there, and they're trying to revive it, in the sense that people don't, Kamala Harris was also genocidal, like, kind of thing. Like they have a problem. People don't like the main people they're trying to throw out. So how are they going to use this kind of their mechanisms of control of the unions just to rehabilitate themselves? And what can we see as the CTA essentially planning for this strike and allowing this strike to happen? How can we see that as part of their political strategy?
Yep.
Yeah, those are all upcoming
We're going to get more
conversations.
information actually through you, AJ, about what that looks like.
Yep.
And for Frank Lara's candidacy.
Yep. Oh, yes. And
And for those of you, if you heard Eduardo talk about damage done and AJ talk about damage done, you both are speaking of them individually. but that damage has been done between the teachers section of the working class and parents and families working class. That's actual damage done. Families might not know it, teachers might not know it, but it exists because it happened. And so that cleft exists there as well. And I do think there's going to have to be something done if it's ever really going to be, if there's going to be real working class solidarity, that damage is going to have to be accounted for, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It's still present. I can say that. If I just showed you all the text messages, all the group messages, it's very much present, and my phone calls. It's very much present to this day. All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you fancy anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, BitChute, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. And you can find the Spanish language version of that, Que Quede la Izquierda, as well, where I will be hosting. You can find any of those links in the episode notes wherever you found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback, especially some of the things that we have said, if we have talked ill about you and you think you'd like to confront us, come on the show, talk to us. If you're a public figure, well, so what? And if there's anything that from union members who would like to discuss further, then you can always reach us or suggest something for us to cover. Contact us at our blog, and Andy will get back to you. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Michael Hoffman and Andy Lipson. Thank you, AJ, for joining us. Thank you all for listening. Fifth co-host. Ciao, ciao.